This is Freemasonry in the Bakken podcast, episode 2. What is Freemasonry? I'm Nolan, a Master Mason, Shriner, and Order of the Eastern Star member.
And I'm Tyler Hall. I'm a Master Mason, Shriner, Order of the Eastern Star member, and Senior D. Malay.
And I am Dr. Robert Bear, Master Mason and Shriner.
The views, opinions, and thoughts shared on the show are that of the individual, host, or guest, and not intended to represent the entire show, other co-hosts, Freemasonry, independent body, or grand jurisdiction as a whole. We try to have as much accurate and correct as possible, but reserve the right to be human and make mistakes. If you feel we have a fact wrong or have a difference of opinion, we encourage you to contact us via our contact page on the website for mature, friendly discussion on the fact or topic. All right, guys. Well, we're back again this week for another exciting episode.
Absolutely.
But before that, how was your guys' Halloween? You guys do anything?
Well, my wife and I, we decided since we weren't having any trick-or-treaters that we would go drive an hour and a half to Bismarck to see Dracula. Yes, living out here. And
which version of Dracula?
Dracula Returns. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Dracula, The Untold Story.
The Untold Story.
The Untold Story, yeah. You know, living out here, you have to drive a ways just to get to anything. So, yeah, that's what we did. Went to see a movie.
How about you, Tyler? Anything?
I was up in Bismarck myself. I went to the Elks for a Halloween party. That was
fun.
How about you? You had little kiddos. You're the only one here with kids. How were the little goblins, witches, and princesses?
I have to give credit to my wife because she does most of the effort on Halloween because so much gets done before 5 before I get off of work. But she got them dressed and drug the herd around various places, including where I worked. And after that, we hit the mall for the mall candy. But we have such small kids that we sent the couple older ones with their friends out door to door. We brought the younger ones home, divvied up the candy, and sent them to bed early. Had a nice, relaxing evening. So
you and the wife went through the candy instead, huh?
Well, my wife swears that when you have a child, that it's in the mother's contract that the mothers get their first take of Halloween candy. So I'm not going to argue with her.
Okay, so that's good. I like that. So then last night we had an extra hour to either have fun or catch up on sleep. So that was kind of nice that daylight saving times ends.
Well, gentlemen, as mentioned, I'm the only one here with children at the moment. Children don't pay attention to the clock when they want to get up. They still get up after the same amount of sleep. So it really didn't help me whatsoever. But all right, well, Bob, you wanted to talk about what is Freemasonry.
I do. I'd like to get our opinion of what is our definition of Freemasonry. What's it mean to each one of us?
Though that's a simple question, the answer is so complex. Do you really think we can get that done in one show?
Oh, no. I think we're talking multiple shows here. There's so many questions that people have, that I have, that I'm sure each one of you have, about what it means to be a Mason or involved in Freemasonry.
I spent all week, I don't want to say slaving, panicking over how I'm going to put this together, because even as a Master Mason, I don't want to say wrestle, but it's on the forefront of every time I enter lodge is what is Masonry? What is being a Freemason about? So, Tyler, let's put you on the spot, because you're sitting over there quietly. To you, what is Freemasonry?
To me, it's really a brotherhood. Coming together as friends, and the 3 cardinal virtues we have is brotherly love, relief, and truth. And as a fraternity, it's coming together as brothers. And I was actually just trying to think of this week too, because I happened to meet a brother entered apprentice at a bar this one of these evenings, and he had along with a friend of his that didn't really have the concept of Freemasonry, and what he's heard is reading a book about conspiracy theories and stuff, and what do you say to that? And so I've been actually thinking a lot about that.
Well, to answer that question specifically, when people tell me it's a conspiracy theory, for those who are familiar with some of the problems we've had in western North Dakota, especially the Dickinson area, we can barely have a meeting. How can we take over the world?
That's for sure.
That's my end. They look at me kind of, that's kind of a good point you make there. So, I don't know, Bob, what's your ideals of Freemasonry?
Well,
or hold on, will you finish, Tyler?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. when only a few people show up for the meeting, it's kind of hard to think about world dominance.
Not that we wouldn't want to.
Yeah,
We're just happy to have a meeting.
exactly. We're glad if a handful of people show up. But like yourself, as I was preparing for the show, it was kind of interesting to know how little I really know.
Exactly.
And a part about being a Mason is learning to grow as a Mason. If we don't grow, we die. And part of this is learning to educate ourselves. And I bet you in the last 2-3 weeks, as we've talked about developing this podcast and making it actually come true, I've actually done more reading about Freemasonry than I have ever since I become a Mason. And actually, it's kind of interesting that I'm reading so much about it. And some of these books we'll be talking about in here. But one that's impacted me the most is a book called Earning Freemasonry. And that's one that I will bring up multiple times here in future podcasts. But, I mean, I really got thinking a lot ever since reading about that. And really, what does it mean to be a Mason? To me, it's learning to improve myself with other gentlemen that's like yourself, brothers that share the same desire. We have, like Tyler said, it's a brotherhood. We want to learn to grow as individuals, but also together.
It's easy to get caught up in the catchphrases and really allow that to just be your generic definition of what Masonry is. One that I've always run across is it makes good men better. Mm-hmm. Have you guys heard that one? That's a simple catchphrase you run quite a bit. Another one is the use of symbols and allegory, or how does that go? The use of a system of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. Have you guys heard of that one?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
That's a stock. I don't want to take away of the significance of that statement, but it's a stock statement. Yeah. It's easy to memorize that, and when somebody asks you what Freemasonry is, just roll that off the tongue and let them figure it out. So while I was doing reading here and there on what Freemasonry was, I read a article from the Masonic Information Center. I actually got it as a newsletter. And the name of it is Stirring Up the Good. And it talks about a pastor. And she was approached by some members of her congregation, specifically one, if they could have Masonic meetings on church grounds, in their common room.
Okay.
And she thought of what type of person he was, what his character was, what his ideals were. And it occurred to her that he stirs up the good. That when you know him, you know he's a good person. And then as she found out who else in the congregation were Master Masons, she realized they were the same type of people. Mm. They didn't draw negative attention. They weren't drama. They weren't this. They weren't that. Which really got me thinking about what Freemasonry is, not as a fraternity or as a whole or worldwide, but what it is for me. And it's a way of life. It's what you do with it. Anybody can recite memorized lines. Anybody can say it makes good men better. But is that what it's really done for you? And by when I say you, for me, has it made me better? Do I internalize? It's a learning process to which I try to internalize and make myself better, but at the same time show the world that I am a better person for it. And that's really what Freemasonry is for me. It's a way of life. Mm-hmm. More than something I do once a week or a means of helping a children's organization. And those are all key parts of it. But it's really about making myself better and realizing where I need to go in life.
Well, and I agree with you. Being a Mason or a member of a Masonic group, we're not a charitable organization. We do that because of who we are, not because of what it is. We strive to be a better husband, a better father, a better fellow, better person, better boss, better worker, and to be better to our fellow men because of who we are.
Now, Tyler brought up the three great tenets of Freemasonry. What were those again?
Brotherly love, relief, and truth.
Brotherly love, relief, and truth. Now, you said those were the cardinal tenets, right? See, and this is where it gets interesting because I read 3 different websites doing some research, just trying to get some background material, and I heard them called 3 different things as well. I heard those were the theological tenets. And then you had 4 cardinal virtues of fortitude, prudence, temperance, and justice.
Right.
So even to each Mason, and not that I'm trying to say, you're wrong, I'm right, blah, blah, blah. It's this shows to each person, Freemasonry is something unique. You ask 100 Masons, and you'll get 100 different answers, which is fantastic. Tyler, you brought that up right there, is what we're about is brotherly love, relief, and truth. And along with that is faith, hope, and charity, which is what you brought up, Bob.
Right. Well, and I think that's why Masonry has so much symbolism, because words over the years change, their meanings change. I mean, when you take the first 500 words that are used quite frequently, and there's 1,500 different definitions. So I think that's one thing. We use so many symbols because the symbols of our craft, they do have deeper meaning without having to use words.
Right.
Well, exactly. And it's easy to portray, pictures worth 1,000 words right there.
Absolutely.
That's why we use the symbols. We can get more across in one simple diagram than what we could spend an hour trying to explain to somebody. And after you've delved into the multiple levels of meaning of each symbol, that it truly starts to transform who you are. It wasn't until, I think it was this past spring, that I really started to delve back into theological studies based on I wanted to understand a lot more of Masonic traditions. I've heard it for 10 years, but something clicked. So even on that symbol, it's like, okay, it's spurring me to learn more of something that I had a good understanding of, but now something clicked to where I now realize there's even a higher level that I want to attain in the understanding. But I just want to make clear for any non-Masons listening, Freemasonry is not a religion, nor does a political group, because the 2 biggest understandings in Lodge is you never talk about religion and you never talk about politics. Afterwards playing cards you can, and that's fine, but during a official business meeting, that's the 2 things you don't bring up.
And then with kind of a disclaimer that, something I've heard is, why will Freemasonry not accept Catholics as members? And that's not true because, we
know members who are Catholic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I happen to be one.
Well, there you go. And it's usually the other way around. It's Catholics who forbid Freemasonry.
Well,
exactly.
they have their group called the Knights of Columbus. Yes.
Well, and we'll get into the history and some of the political religious political issues on a different podcast that we'd like to dispel. But yeah, you have a good point there, Tyler.
Absolutely. And you have to believe in the Supreme Being in order to become a member, and that's just it. Catholics do, and so they're.
A lot of it boils down to misunderstanding. And as I've been doing some research, it's not so much on a theological perspective, it's more on a political perspective.
And a financial perspective.
On where these problems and differences have arisen, and sometimes they're veiled in under a theological cloak.
And I think the true meanings get lost, or the true reasons get misinterpreted, and as a result, people get the wrong idea, or they're led down the wrong road. And again, I think future podcasts would be something to really go into.
Well, even as a fraternity of brotherly love, I've seen 2 Masons argue to the point where they don't almost talk again. And so it's easy for when 2 Masons who are in a fraternity of brotherly love, relief, truth, charity, tolerance, understanding, get to that point, how easy it is for people of different groups who don't understand each other to get to that point. Because unfortunately, for all the tenets we try to adhere to and understand through our symbolism, allegory, etc., we're still human.
Right.
And if we were above that, we would need fraternities like the Freemasons to raise us and make us better men.
And that's what I love about the fraternity too, is the fact that, we can have differences of opinion in politics or religion or whatever, and still have that connection and still have that, we can talk with each other and be real good, deep friends.
Well, I think we can put those differences aside, and I think throughout history, we've seen these things happen when it comes to brothers getting together, whether it be differences of opinion when it comes to religion, politics. We've seen this happen multiple times during the Civil War, where the two different sides were able to put their differences together so that they could meet together in lodge. And when it comes to freedom of religion, that is something that really was pushed by the Masons early on, because that is our belief, that you do have freedom of religion. It doesn't matter what religion it is. It doesn't matter if you're Protestant, Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, as long as you Buddhist, yeah, as long as you believe in the Supreme Being, you can be a Mason. Now that was something that kind of caused some problems with the Grand Lodge of the Orient, which would happen to be the Grand Lodge of France. In the late 19th century, they started to allow atheists to become members of the Masonic organization.
Well, not to fully discount what you're saying, what I had understood is atheists had lied, said they were religious.
There was some deception
and then
in there.
When there were enough of the clandestine atheists in power at the right positions, then they could basically bully their way into,
absolutely.
and change the bylaws.
Yes, they did.
So it wasn't that all of a sudden the Grand Lodge of France said, you know what, we don't, we'll let atheists in. It was, they had lied, the atheists had lied up to that point.
Right,
so.
they did, and you're correct. I was
That's okay. I just wanted to make it clear that all of a sudden there wasn't some that the French Freemasons didn't care initially. Well, and I'm sure a lot of those, when this did happen, they left. That's just a guess that if you have that schism of should we or should we not allow this, that once the clandestine nature of those who were making these changes were known, you probably had a lot of dissent and some leaving. But
right.
That's for future research. If any listener knows, let us know.
Right. But after they started allowing atheists to become members, then you had the Grand Lodge of England and
Ireland, Russia, your big European ones, and
the United States and Canada, which basically said that we do not recognize Freemasons from France because of that. And my understanding is they continue to allow that today, members who are atheists to join. So that's why.
I have no idea. Have you heard it all, Tyler?
I have not.
Maybe that's what I'll look that up for next, and we'll confirm whether or not that's allowed. But and that does bring to mind, is Freemasonry an international order?
Tyler, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a brotherhood that's pretty international.
Well, I think
they can be read two different ways. Are there Masons around the world? Yes.
Right.
But it is a one organized fraternity? No.
No, because
I agree with that.
Because over in Europe, you do have Grand Lodges of the whole countries, where they have one Grand Lodge which has jurisdiction over everybody.
But in their defense, their countries are about the size of our states.
Well, yeah. But in the United States here and in Canada, each state has its own governing body when it comes to the Grand Lodge. So we can make our own rules. That was one thing that was started off early agreement.
Do you know why that happened? I believe I read an article, so I reserve the right to be incorrect on this, but I believe I know the answer. Do either of you gentlemen know why?
Well, here's my understanding, and then tell me if I'm wrong. George Washington did have an opportunity to have the Grand Lodge of the United States. He was approached, but he decided not to do that. Now, what did you hear?
Well, Tyler, did you hear anything on why? There's a Grand Lodge per state and per province. Okay, my understanding is that even prior to the formation of the United States, and George Washington probably was approached.
Mm-hmm.
However, initially, that each area was going to be a self-governing, sovereign area, instead of a coalition of states, it was going to be sovereign states.
Right, they govern themselves.
So each one had their own Grand Lodge, and it was just preserved. So kind of on that line, but they initially had their own since they're independent sovereign bodies as colonies.
Well, and many of their colonies also had their own religion, so they wanted to be self-governing, have their own religion, and
their own Grand Lodge.
And
which makes sense.
Right. And even after, they developed the U.S. Constitution, the Grand Lodges still wanted to have their own sovereign state. So that's why I think today they still decide to govern themselves, which is kind of interesting because think about it. If one body doesn't like another body, they just don't recognize each other.
Yes, which once again brings up my whole argument: is this not supposed to be about brotherly love, not geopolitical concerns?
I agree, but
that's I've irritated some people with that discussion, and I understand that you have a difference of opinion, but some people in and out, I'm not just talking about within the fraternity, but just as a whole, some people can take that too far.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's my understanding that there's about 42 Grand Lodges that recognize each other, have a reciprocity, with about 8 that don't. And we're not even talking the co-masonry lodges. And, those are just assumed not to be recognized by, most state Grand Lodges. So,
well, I think if you look at all the various lodges, there's over 13,000 lodges themselves just here in the United States.
Right.
So, I mean, it's large. So, for the lodges not to be able to, come to some kind of common agreement and work through those things.
Well, and the whole premise of Freemasonry is to travel freely and be recognized and enjoy that camaraderie, that brotherly love, to get the relief, to know the truth. That's where it originated in Europe, was they were independent of the politics.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's so great, just to travel around and go to, a lodge and meet new brothers that you've never met before.
That's how we came to be.
Well,
absolutely.
And I've been very blessed in that, because when I left Pennsylvania, I went down to Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, and that's where I did my doctoral work, and I met some wonderful Masons down there and learned a whole different way of Masonic life. And then from there, I went out to Salt Lake City, Utah, and again met some really wonderful Masons there, became very active there, and they too have a very different differences of opinion. But you know what? We're all bound together by the same values and beliefs, with, Tyler, you kind of brought up there, brotherly love, the trust, and, and now here I am in Dickinson, North Dakota, and again, same men, different values. Same values, but different ways of living. That's what I wanted to say, different ways of living. But again, we're all the same.
Well, and the last lodge meeting we had in Dickinson showed just what it is like to be a traveling Mason, in that I'd probably say of the 9 gentlemen we had in lodge, was that 4 of them were first-time visitors because they were up here working in the Bakken.
So we're kind of like a melting pot.
Well, exactly, and that was one of the foundations of this podcast, is to reach out to everybody saying, hey, we're out here, come visit with us. We want to hear your opinion. We want to know your views. And you do get that rift of, very lax way of thinking of doing Freemasonry to the very rigid Freemasonry, but I think we could all come together because that's who we are.
Right.
And if we can't meet in a room with civil discussion, we really need to sit down and rethink what Freemasonry is to us individually.
Yes, I agree.
I think to close this out, we should talk about that Freemasons consider themselves speculative Masons. When you're initiated through the different levels, it is brought to your attention that there's a difference between speculative and operative. Operative meaning guys who actually work with stone. To this day you have Masons and, unions who go out and lay bricks. Those are the operative Masons. Freemasons and the Freemason fraternity is speculative Masonry. We take the working tools of the Masons, especially the medieval Masons, and we use those as the symbols we're talking about. And that's a big part of what Masonry is, that we don't actually work with the stone, but we use the lessons and the tools of the Masons. Especially, like I said, the medieval Masons that traveled internationally and felt this brotherly love and whatnot. And that's what we use, those as the symbols to teach us to be better men.
And that's, where, coming in the Blue Lodge, that's when you start having the entered apprentice Mason, which is, back then they started out as the apprentices, and that's, the craft. Then they got their experience and their, jumped up, eventually was passed to the fellow craft. And so that they did more things, they had more responsibility, they had more knowledge, and then they were raised to as a master mason eventually once they got more experience and stuff.
The interesting thing is, when I was a child, and of course my father, being a Mason, he would go to work, and I would be reading through the newspaper, and I'd look at the classified, and the classified, one of the biggest section was for Masons. And I thought, oh wow, they really need a lot of us Masons. That's why my dad, he's going to work as a Mason. So it's kind of interesting, the operative Mason. No, he wasn't actually going there to build something out of stone or chisel something. And so it was kind of interesting how growing up it was like that.
Which is funny because, like, my grandfather was an actual operative Mason. And unfortunately, I didn't get to know him as well as I could have because he lived out of state. We were the one. My dad's the one actually moved out of state. But yeah, your father was a Freemason,
right?
And your grandfather was a Freemason,
right?
Well, my grandfather was an operative Mason, doing the actual stonework, and that's what I had assumed when I first started hearing about Freemasonry, was what they did.
Yeah, I couldn't understand why my father worked two different jobs. He worked selling travel trailers during the day and stonecutter at night, and then I learned as I matured that no, he was not an operative Mason.
It's
he
amazing
was a speculative Mason.
It's amazing how that works, isn't it?
So yes, symbolism, words. There we go. How
allegory.
Words have different. Yeah,
I think we started the conversation off with that, and I'm sure we'll have many more opportunities to talk about this in episodes to come.
And it'd be really interesting if some of our listeners could tell us some of their childhood thoughts or their ideas that they had growing up about what they learned about or heard about a Mason.
How their perceptions have changed from being a child, young adult, and actually now being either an adult who's not a Mason or an actual Freemason. How things have changed for you with your understanding. So
absolutely.
All right, well, I think it's about that time where we bring this to a close. And once again, I would love to thank the Badlands Shrine Circus Management Unit for sponsoring this hopefully educational and fun-filled podcast. So if you get a chance to reach out to a Badlands Shrine member, tell them hi for us.
And if you know of any Masonic or appendant body activities coming up in the Bakken area, you can visit our website at www.bakkenmasons.com and click on the trestle board. If you have any comments or suggestions on an episode, you can contact us on our website, our Facebook page at facebook.com/BakkenMasons, Twitter at BakkenMasons.com, email us at contact@BakkenMasons.com, or leave us a voicemail at 701-484-1512. And if you are discussing a show, topic, or the podcast with friends online, we encourage you the use of the hashtag Bakken Masons.
And one final point on that. About 2 days ago, before we recorded this episode, I put on our Facebook and Twitter that we'd be talking about what is Freemason, or Freemasonry, or what are Freemasons. And we didn't get any response, but we're still willing to take and wanting you to respond to what you feel Freemasonry is. Use the hashtag Bakken Masons, and we'll bring it up on a future episode. We would love to get everybody's input on this one, plus the childhood memories of what a Freemason is or Masonry is to what you think it is now. So.
And the time now has come to say farewell. So from Nolan, Tyler, and myself, Dr. Bob, I'd like to say thank you all for listening to our podcast. We look forward to you joining us in future episodes. Our next one, episode 3. But before I leave, I would like to leave you with these parting thoughts from past Grandmaster R.V. Burley. A Mason. A Mason is a man who professes a faith in God. As a man of faith, he uses the tools of moral and ethical truth to serve mankind. A Mason binds himself to like-minded men in a brotherhood that transcends all religion, race, ethics, social, cultural, and educational differences. In the fellowship with his brothers, a Mason finds ways in which to serve his God, his family, his fellow man, and his country. A Mason is dedicated. He recognizes his responsibility for justice, truth, charity, enlightenment, freedom and liberty, honesty, and integrity in all aspects of human endeavor. A Mason is such a man.